On a warm Saturday afternoon when the sky over Willow Creek Park glowed a soft blue and the trees whispered like witnesses holding their breath. The wedding began quietly, beautifully, and without the slightest intention of making history, because history, as it often does, arrived uninvited. White chairs lined the lawn in careful rows, mason jars filled with baby's breath caught the sunlight, and a small string quartet tuned their instruments near a wooden arch, wrapped in ivory fabric and eucalyptus leaves, while guests, friends, co-workers, cousins, neighbors smiled and murmured, their voices low and reverent, because love has a way of commanding silence before it commands applause. And at the center of it all stood the groom, Daniel Brooks, tall, calm, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his posture straight not from nerves but from a lifetime of learning how to stand, steady in rooms that watched him too closely, a black man about to marry the woman he loved, unaware that just beyond the park's edge, behind a row of manicured hedges and a white picket fence, someone was already dialing 911. Margaret Whitmore had lived across from Willow Creek Park for 27 years, long enough to believe that time itself had appointed her the unofficial guardian of how things were supposed to be, and as she peered through her lace curtains at the gathering, her lips pressed into a thin line, because to her eyes the wedding looked loud even though it wasn't, crowded even though it followed park permits to the letter, and most of all, out of place, a phrase she used often and never examined. And when she noticed the groom, his skin dark against the pale florals, his friends laughing, his family proud, something tight twisted in her chest, an old, unnamed fear that had learned to speak through authority. So she picked up the phone, her fingers trembling not with doubt but with certainty, and told the dispatcher that there was a suspicious gathering in the park, that it looked unlicensed, that there were too many people, and though she never said the word black, it hung in the air like a dog whistle, clear enough to be heard. Back in the park, Daniel adjusted his cufflinks and smiled at his best man, Marcus, who joked about the ring bearer practicing his runway walk, and Daniel laughed a low, warm sound, because laughter had always been his shield and his offering, but beneath it lay a deep awareness of space and eyes, of how joy sometimes needed to brace itself, and as he glanced toward the entrance of the park, he felt a flicker of unease he couldn't place, dismissed it, and focused instead on the aisle where his bride would soon appear, because today, he promised himself, was about love, not vigilance. The bride, Aisha Reynolds, stood with her mother beneath the shade of an oak tree, smoothing her dress, breathing through happy tears, whispering, "I'm ready," and her mother squeezed her hands, pride and history flowing between them, a lineage of women who had learned to be both gentle and unbreakable. And when the music began, the guests rose, smiles widening, phones lifting just enough to capture the moment without stealing it, and Daniel turned, his face softening into something like awe as Aisha stepped into view, radiant, steady, walking toward him with a confidence born of being chosen and choosing in return. Then the sirens came, not loud at first, just a distant wail that threaded through the music like a wrong note, and some guests glanced around, puzzled while the quartet faltered, unsure whether to continue, and Daniel felt his chest tighten, because sirens had a way of pulling him backward through time, to traffic stops that took too long, to questions that felt like accusations, to moments when calm was demanded of him even when fear was justified. And as the sound grew closer, unmistakable now, a murmur rippled through the crowd, confusion turning to concern, and Aisha reached Daniel's side, their hands finding each other instinctively, fingers locking as if to say, "Whatever this is, we face it together." Two police cruisers rolled to a stop at the park entrance, lights flashing blue and red across white dresses and dark suits, casting the scene in stuttering color, and an officer stepped out, scanning the gathering with professional neutrality that masked a readiness learned on the job, while another spoke into a radio, and the officiant lowered his book, his smile fading into a polite, cautious line, and someone whispered, "Is everything okay?" And Daniel took a slow breath, lifting his chin, because this was the posture he knew, the one that said calm, cooperative, unthreatening, even when the question itself felt like a test. The first officer approached, asking who was in charge, and Daniel stepped forward before anyone else could, his voice even as he explained that this was a permitted wedding, documents filed, fees paid, copies available, and as he spoke, He watched the officer's eyes move from his face to the guests, to the decorations, to the arch measuring, assessing, and somewhere across the street, Margaret Whitmore stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching with a satisfaction that quickly soured into something else when the scene didn't unfold the way she expected. Because instead of chaos, there was composure, instead of disorder, there was elegance, and instead of fear, there was love standing its ground. The second officer returned from the cruiser, holding a clipboard, and asked for identification, and Daniel provided it without comment. Though Aisha felt his grip tighten, a silent question passing between them. Why today? Why here? Why now? And the guests stood in a careful hush, the joy of moments ago suspended like glass, fragile and shimmering, while the officers conferred in low voices, one nodding, the other frowning slightly, and then the frown eased as recognition flickered. Because names have weight, and Daniel Brooks was not just a groom but a man whose work had touched the city in ways few realized at first glance. As the officer looked back at Daniel, his posture shifted, respect edging into his tone as he said, "Sir, can you confirm? Are you the Daniel Brooks with the Brooks Community Initiative?" And a ripple of surprise moved through the guests. Because many knew Daniel as a friend, a mentor, a son, but not all knew the full scope of what he'd built. Scholarship programs, neighborhood clinics, partnerships with the very department now standing before him. And Daniel nodded, offering a small, polite smile that carried no triumph, only truth. And across the street, Margaret's face drained of color as the pieces fell into place, because the man she'd labeled suspicious was suddenly someone the city praised, someone the news had featured, someone whose name adorned plaques she'd walked past without reading. And the officer cleared his throat, turning to the crowd to announce that everything was in order, that the call had been a misunderstanding, that the wedding could continue. And relief washed over the lawn like a soft rain, applause breaking out, tentative at first, then fuller, stronger, not celebratory but supportive, a collective exhale, while Aisha leaned into Daniel, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." And Daniel squeezed her hand, whispering back, "I'm proud of us." Yet even as the officers apologized and returned to their cars, the air carried a new gravity, a knowledge that love had just been tested and had not retreated. And as the sirens faded away, Daniel turned to the guests, meeting their eyes, and spoke with a warmth that steadied the moment, thanking them for their patience, for their presence, for believing that joy deserved space. And as the officiant lifted his book once more and the quartet resumed, the wedding moved forward, not as it had been before, but stronger, more deliberate. A declaration not just of marriage but of dignity, while across the street Margaret Whitmore retreated indoors, her certainty shattered into questions she had long avoided. And as the first vows were about to be spoken, Daniel paused, looking out at the faces before him, at the woman beside him, and at the path that had led here. And if this story has already pulled you in, if you feel the tension and the truth of it, remember to subscribe to this channel, because stories like this, stories of resilience, love, and the moments that reveal who we really are, deserve to be told, and this is only the beginning.